Welcome, Miss Linda.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So I know you're a little past midlife, just a smidgen. And I'm curious how your perspective on midlife shifted, or your perspective on life shifted during midlife. And I think a midlife, we can name it whatever we want, but the American Psychological Association says 36 to 64, but I think of it 35 plus, but whatever time frame you want to look at it. What did you notice perspective wise shifts in that time in your life?
Okay. I will tell a story. I believe it was at my 40th birthday. In the evening after we'd had supper, I called for a meeting in the living room with my two children and my husband. And I announced that this was my 40th birthday and nobody remembered. And therefore, I felt as though I was not that important or needed in their life. And I was going to look for a job the next day. This started a whole new life for me as far as what I do. I became a part-time school secretary and then a full-time school secretary. And then going back at night after being secretary all day, I had a carpool and we drove an hour to classes at Southwestern OSU and I got recertified. When I came back, the sixth grade teacher had left and I walked into her shoes. From there, it was, I still was a wife and I still was a parent, but I was becoming successful in my own realm, which was very exciting. I began teaching sixth grade, and when you're taught fifth and sixth, the school closed. I moved to junior high and taught American Studies and English. This was due to a midlife crisis? No. Recognition? No. Unrecognized. And I took off on my own. A year or two after I started teaching, my husband Steve and I went on a camping trip in Colorado during the summer. We camped in a tent and cooked over a open fire. And the next summer, I went to Southwest OSU and got my master's degree because I didn't want to camp ever again like that. So the midlife crisis or the midlife changes for me was very stepping out of my, what would you say, my comfort zone. But I am so thankful that it happened. So much of what I was doing seemed to have an effect that was positive to most of my students. And my children, my personal birth children, did beautifully without me being at home 24/7 like I had been. Going into midlife, it was an interesting journey, and I wouldn't have traded it for anything. Does that kind of answer your
It
question?
does. It does. No, and it's I feel so horrible. It's funny, it's as a child. Yeah, because before we started recording, listeners, we were trying to remember, was it her 40th? What grade was I in? And yeah, it is how well, I think for you it went from many people start to feel invisible in midlife. That's something you hear a lot, but I feel like you went from having felt invisible to making yourself visible by prioritizing yourself. And you already had a teacher's, certification, but yet you had stayed home for how many years at that point? 15, maybe? Is that accurate? Yeah. And then, so of course, you had to recertify it, get it recertified. And I remember too during that time that I'd be in church and and what a prayer request was like that my mom will get a job. Because it was like when you were applying, I think it's when you were applying for part-time secretary stuff. And it was just like, yeah, it was a time. It must have been like higher grade school for me.
I think so, and I'm sure you remember the school secretary at the school that you attended in Hoover. and Barbara Hannafield. And I went in and was talking to her one day about planning to get off the volunteer wagon and begin working. And she said, Linda, you need to start as a school secretary. You'll find out if you want to be in the school system then. And she was right. It did take me to realize I don't think I was ready to teach yet, but I haven't regretted that.
Yeah.
And I should say thank you for forgetting my birthday. I'm not going to put you off that guilt trip yet.
That's so horrible. So horrible. I blame dad. It's so how many years did you teach? So from 6th grade through the junior high, how many years were you a teacher?
I think I started teaching in 95 and retired in '05, but it must have been more than that because I know have a plaque that had for 20 years in the Lawton school system.
Uh-huh.
But I had taught 1 year while your dad was in Vietnam, and so they changed it to 21 years in the school system. But I had been a secretary for part of that time, and
Yeah.
I think it was 90 or 91 that I got my teaching degree
Mhm.
or went back in. Do you remember where
I
you
do. Yeah, I was going to college, and so that would have been 91 when you were getting your master's.
Okay. All right. No, my master's was later. That was my teaching degree because I'm
Oh.
thinking I started teaching when you went off to college.
Yes, yes.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So it took me another year and the experience of camping in Colorado that got me after my master's.
I'll do anything. Just don't make me do that again. And then
Amen.
the irony is that I moved to Colorado after college, right? So it's so funny. So how have you embraced change over the years, right? So stay-at-home mom, working woman, and for 25-ish years, and you've been retired then for how many? Help me with the math.
It will be 20 years this coming end
Wow.
of school year. 2005 is when I retired, May.
Wow. You
Mhm.
retired at 61.
I guess so.
Yeah, math, I think.
It did.
Wow. Okay. Okay. Yeah. What has helped you throughout that journey to have a positive mindset really about the journey? Because I do think that's something that grandma passed down, right? Her mindset was just amazing and so funny and so really so generous, like generous mindset. So, how has yours evolved over the years? What would you say?
I could never get into the ranks of my mother. She was amazing. But that being said, I think my mindset was learn as much as you can as soon as you can. And to pass it on was such a joy because with you as my baby in college, I started taking workshops. And one year, I even had a workshop in Williamsburg for Colonial. And I remember you were on 16th Street at that time. So workshops usually were Lawton, Oklahoma centered, but that was one that I really took off on and thoroughly enjoyed. That being said, I went to a doctor to get what I called my happy shots at that time, and the nurse said, "Have you ever thought about doing anything with the medieval ages?" And so I began to expand into things I never thought I would do, and I had medieval fairs that my students loved. Then I had colonial days, and then we went into math games, bubble day, and I learned and the students learned what it was like to step out of your comfort zone, have parents come in and see what their children are doing, and they were teaching each of these subjects to not only the students, but anybody in the neighborhood who wanted to come. As far as a mindset, it was, I wonder if we could do this. And teaching was very important in my life after my children left home. I I guess does that answer?
The reason I was laughing is I remember when you came to DC to do that stuff at Colonial Williamsburg, and do you remember you put on a hat and Bernard hissed at you?
Bernard hissed at anybody for anything. He has
But do you
even
remember? Like, it freaked him out. He had this big hat, and he was so freaked out. That's what I remember from your experience at Colonial Williamsburg, but anyway. And something else you said, what was a happy shot?
Oh, that was during menopause. I shouldn't have mentioned that, but my students would
Oh.
say, "Mrs. Wilson, isn't it about time for happy shots?" Because it was a mood changer. I didn't fly off the handle. And when I'd start to fly off the handle, I went for my happy shots and I came back a better person.
What
So
were in the shots?
I don't know. They were for menopause to help the hormones. It was some kind of
Yeah.
a hormone shot. Does that help?
Yeah, it does help. But I would
Yeah.
love to know what the shots were because, it doesn't seem like I figured you didn't really have menopause because of the hysterectomy.
Right. It was a partial.
Oh, it was a partial. Okay, I see.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I kept my fallopian tubes. So therefore, I had the mood changes as the fallopian tubes and the ovaries began to wear out.
Yeah, yeah. Change. Or
Change. That
yes,
sounds
yes.
better. Yeah.
Okay, I see. Yeah, so you did probably it was HRT, hormone replacement therapy of some sort. Not sure what was in
No.
that shot. Okay. How often did you get the shot? Now I'm vaguely remembering happy shots.
Yes. I Kimberly, you're talking about 30 years
I
ago.
know, it's been a while.
It was not more than once a month.
Oh, okay, so, like, once a month-ish.
Yeah,
Okay,
probably. Yeah.
yeah. What would you say? Because one of the things I'm just looking over, I've got my notes over to the right, but one of the things that I've always loved and admired about you, and grandma had this too, was creativity, right? And even just looking behind you, you've got so much going on, right? You always have so much. You have all these stamps, you've got all the cross stitch thing, you were into trichem, and you're into knitting, crocheting, all the things, scrapbooking. And so, how has your connection to creativity and hobbies morphed over the years?
It has enlarged because I find peace and enjoyment in doing it. To cut out, and I just do patchwork. I'm not getting into all this, the quilting with all this exact stuff. I want to do it for the enjoyment. And I do patchworks, I cut them out. And when I cut them out and get them situated, pinned together, and get in front of that sewing machine, it's just a joy. It feels so good. And as far as the others, they've been around for quite a while. The scrapbooking has enlarged to a point where it's a whale and I want more of a goldfish, and I need to take care of that problem. But knitting and crocheting, it's portable when I go to the doctors and dentists, etc. I can carry this with me, carry it in the car, and while I'm watching the news, I have that I can enjoy doing. And if I don't enjoy it, I can put it in the Goodwill bag. So it has become a comfort for me. I did not mention jigsaw puzzles. I had an 8,000 piece jigsaw puzzle that took us a year and a half that we could not eat at the dining room table because it covered the dining room table. There were certain staff members at Lee School that would come over every night and we would work on this puzzle. I now do 1,000, which is much more doable. And right now, I have walked into my sunroom a couple of times just to decompress. And I've got a 500 piece out that was given to me for my birthday recently. And I'm playing with that. And I've discovered that I feel comfort, I feel peace, and I feel like I am rejuvenating while I'm working that puzzle because every time I find a piece, it's got one, whether anybody's there to hear me or not. I'm proud of that accomplishment. It's like the quilt when it's done, or the scarf when it's done, or whatever, the Afghan. There's peace in working with it. And when it leaves, then I quit. I don't have to do that. And it's the same with reading. When I read, there are some books I go, I don't need this. And I put it in the Goodwill bag. And there are others that I keep to reread if I want to. So reading is another thing that I really wasn't able to get into while I was teaching because I was studying to teach, and it included reading, but it wasn't for enjoyment. It was for learning, and there's a difference. And I still learn as I read some books, but some not so much. Just
For pleasure.
just escape. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. Uh-huh.
What would you say has kept your joy for life and joy for learning? Because I think for a lot of people, when they reach your age, it's hard. Everything hurts. Don't have the cognitive capacity, maybe for some people, that you did when you were younger. Again, not for everyone. But I'm wondering how I think dad has contributed because you guys feed off each other of like always learning and
Yes.
doing and projects and the whole thing. But what would you say for listeners who are just wondering about some words of wisdom, how to stay young and engaged in life, even when and if you do retire, or even when things do change and things are hard?
Yoga has been a godsend to me, and I thank you for that because I had never heard of it when you opened your studio. And so that is one thing. Also, just sitting quietly is so wonderful. Uh, and I know you referred to the monkey brain, and sometimes to just let him jump all around or her, to jump all around as a monkey would do, tells me that I don't have to worry about anything right now, and it's nice. S So that along with yoga, and also, I don't know where this came up in my notes, but I now live in the country, and I fought it. I really didn't want to ever live in the country, and I lived there a short time whilst your dad was in Nam, then moved back to the Lawton area and had our careers there, raised our children there. And then when I retired, within a year, we moved out to the country, and I have never regretted it, even with major plumbing problems, that sort of thing. The well's gone out twice. The peace and quiet and the ability to look out and see a deer cross my yard with her, it's a doe with two of her babies, is worth any problem. Be perfectly honest, I've gotten active in my church, and that is a calming and a joyful experience. I am Sunday school teacher or leader, I should say. I'm the liturgist who reads things during church. I'm in charge of the prayer chain. And as I get these obligations, I think when it's over each Sunday or when the prayer chain is sent out, I sit back and say, thank you, Lord. It is such a pleasure to serve. And that's where I am now. Church, yoga, meditation or devotion, or just monkey mind, these all help me. And as I was getting, going through the 40s and the 50s, I loved life and I did a lot with my students that I used to do with my own children, which is extracurricular activities. I remember with my children, I was PTA president, I was PTA secretary, I was homeroom mother, I was Cub Scout leader, I was campfire leader, you name it. If they needed a job done, I would be willing to do it. And so during that time, during my beginning of my midlife time, I expanded into more work around other situations, and I left them if I didn't enjoy them.
Yeah, I
And
think
some
that's
people, yeah, some
that's a
people
really big
stay too
thing.
long. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
totally. Yeah, I think recognize that's one thing I hear a lot with regard to midlife is like cutting your losses a bit. Just recognize, oh, good use of my time or energy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. And I know you have taught me, and this is farther on in the discussion, but with what is it, health and wellness or career and
Mhm.
reinvention, either of those subjects, you talked about toxic people and toxic situations. And that was a new word for me. And I appreciate your giving it to me because I was able to eliminate things in my life that were toxic that I held on to because I thought I needed to. And at midlife, enjoy the rest of your life and don't hang on to relationships that are painful mentally or physically, and don't hang on to thoughts that are like that. Get out of my mind is really important.
Mhm. Yeah, it's all about boundaries, right? The ability to set boundaries and recognize what is helping, what is not helping. What would you
Yeah,
like to have more of? What do you want to have less of? How do you feel after you're with this person? How do you feel after you're with this person? And just paying attention to all that. There's no right or wrong. We're all different. And I think it's important to recognize that we don't have to try to cookie cutter ourselves.
exactly. Yes. And with that, after my mother's death, my sister and I started a relationship we'd never had before. And we get together once a month, tell family stories, keep up with each other, and just love each other. And she was 4 years older than I was, and do the math. I was in 6th grade, she was off to college. So, the relationship was pretty chippy, unworthy. We just didn't have it, and we now have it, and relationships like that are important. My girlfriend, Stevie Finley, who first day of 1st grade, I invited her to come home with me, and she called her mom and said, "I'm at Linda's," and hung up, and her mother had no idea who Linda was. She had no idea where her daughter was, and we grew up together in Campfire. We then married, had children, and left each other's company. Now we're back, and I can call her anytime, day or night, and she can do the same with me if we need to talk or if we need to get together. And
Mhm.
that relationship is such a positive one. I want I wanted to bring it out. That, and for my sister and I to get this. I have others, the MDs, which are Methodist dames, and we get together to just share, and we needed it. And then the campfire reunions, we used to have 10 or 12. We now have 4 that get together, and they're coming next weekend. And we'll just sit and do puzzles, go to the mountains, and just enjoy each other's company for a couple of days. And
Mhm.
that being said, relationships from 40 on continue to be important. And 40, Stevie and I didn't have a relationship. My sister and I did not. 60, no. Finally, at 70, we began to have something coming that has developed into something very beautiful. And
Mhm.
I must admit, Steve and I have been married for 61 years. With that, we've had years that were not good. We have had years that have been fabulous. We have both gone through our midlife crisis, and we have survived mainly because neither one of us believe in divorce. We believe that you should stay together and work it out. And so that's another relationship, and it has been a challenge. It was not all a bed of roses. And so all relationships take work. And if you don't work at it, you're going to lose it, no matter family or friends or acquaintances. They all fit into that. What a
Mhm.
sermon.
I know, quite the soapbox. But I think it is. It's good reminders because right now they talk about like loneliness being an epidemic. And I think particularly as we age, it's so important to have relationships. And yet it's hard. The big thing I hear from people is just how hard it is to make friends as we get older. And honestly, I'm hearing this from people post college. It's not just, oh, midlife or seniors. So I really appreciate you emphasizing that. And God love me some Stevie. Give her my best. I love you listeners. Stevie, 4th grade, I had to memorize a poem for the next day, which what kind of cruelty is that? And I'm not getting it at all. And I think you were done with me about it. And Stevie was somehow visiting. I happened to be there that night and she helped me through the freaking poem, which I don't remember what the poem was, but she helped me get it and I memorized it and I said it the next day. And I have never, ever forgotten that. Stevie has my heart till the day I die because of that. And meanwhile, you'd probably help me memorize many things over the years, but Stevie was like the
Maybe.
hero that came in that day. Yeah, 4th grade. What could it have been that we were memorizing? I have no idea. But do you
Maybe the
remember that?
Gettysburg. No, I'm wondering if something like the Gettysburg Address.
Surely not.
Oh, I had to memorize it, but it was 7th grade, but
Yeah.
I would not be surprised. That was Cookie Salmon, your teacher, right?
Hmm.
Uh-huh,
He
I
was,
can see
yeah.
her I can see her doing that.
Do you remember what Mrs. Stever did to me in 3rd grade?
No. Stever? In 3rd grade? I thought you had Knowles was 2nd grade. Yeah, I
She
think.
told me to stop writing creative stories about turtles.
Yes, I didn't remember who it was, but,
Oh, I
we
remember.
we have condemned her to hell for that. No,
Stever
that's prob
broke me. Oh my god. Listeners, so I have a scrapbook that my mom saved. I made it and you saved it, which is great because I have it here. But in the 3rd grade, it was creative writing time, and I wrote only stories about Myrtle, Erdle, Yertle, Nosy, and Pudding, which were my turtles of the time. And I was obsessed with them like I am with orangutans, pigs, and pugs now. And anyway, I would write all these stories, and we'd be walking by a graveyard and would be like, "Boo," all this sort of stuff, right? I thought they were very witty. I clearly only had one topic in mind. And Mrs. Stever said in front of the class that maybe I should get another topic. And I remember going out into the hallway and crying, and I'm still upset about it. And how many years later is it? 30, 42 years later?
I think so.
Mrs. Stever, I'm still mad at you.
You
So,
have not let
yeah,
that go.
I will not let that go. Yes, you're right. You're right. So, anyway, I do love me some Stevie. And it is, I love hearing that, and I know this, but I forget that it was your first day of 1st grade, which is so sweet.
It is
What in what ways do you prioritize? And I feel like you've spoken to this, your physical and mental health. I know yoga, I know church community there is important to you. um, Reading, your hobbies. But is there anything else as you think about physical and mental health in particular? And your happy shots, which we don't know what was in there, and maybe we should try to find out because maybe our listeners would be interested. But things have probably upgraded from the happy shot to other things at this point. But yeah, I'm just curious, any other ideas that you'd like to share with listeners on physical or mental, emotional wellness?
this is so bad. I love to shop. In the when I was 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, I love to shop. Now, I love to fill Goodwill bags with what I shopped for. It that gives me quite a peace of mind. Being out in the country is amazing. You have it at West Virginia, and I have it here, and it's really funny because or I should say odd. We go into a city for a doctor's appointment or grocery shopping or whatever, and I just wanna get back home where I don't have the ear clutter, and I think that over the years, during the earlier years, I enjoyed the noise. You'd have to be a teacher, but I guess that there was just a point where I realized that I needed to be able to get away, and I have a bunkhouse here. It's a two-story building that we got at Lowe's and had built, and it is an area where I can go and be totally away from everything. There's no we have electricity for warmth and coolness, but it is a comfort place, and I think that the older you get, the more you need to love yourself and enjoy being with just yourself. And I think that's a quote that Thomas Jefferson said, that if you love yourself, you'll never lack for good company. It's something like that, and I thought, "That is so true." When Steve first left for Nam, was pregnant with Chris, but I just really needed more interaction with other people and had to move into Lawton as soon as we possibly could when he got back because of the discomfort of the loneliness. And that goes away as you get older. All of a sudden, you start liking yourself. But that also comes because you've lost relatives and friends that you loved and spent time with and cared about. Parents, friends, it's really painful when I start to think about that. And again, I can go and be with myself and remember, maybe journal about the person, and it's healing. But I don't know if that answers it. I don't know if I went off on a tangent, but that's what I can decipher as changes in my life that are good because I like myself better.
One of the pieces that you said that I think is important and that I'm definitely noticing is the challenge of noise. And so these are also noise canceling headphones, which I have found to be so important. Just the sounds, restaurants are so challenging for me now. There's just things that like I used to enjoy the activity and now I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so overstimulating. And that is one of the beauties of being able to be out in West Virginia from time to time, or of course, you living in Oklahoma. And but with someone who I interviewed told me, and she just wrote a book that's coming out in 2025 called Age Like a Yogi. And she said, as we get older, our hearing becomes like our sensitivity to sound becomes increased. And I was like, oh, it's really interesting because I'm finding it to be really intensified for me and it's challenging. And so it's just, I just wanted to highlight on that or hit on that because you mentioned that. And it is something that I think people I don't know, it's we're just no longer willing to tolerate things that we used to tolerate, and so it's invest in these and walk around, or sometimes I even have them on in my home, like, just to drown out any outdoors outside sounds that just is not what I brought in.
Exactly. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Well, as you think about too and I feel like we've talked about this career and reinvention for you, and as you think about it, it sounds as if the reinvention piece, stay-at-home mom, go back to school, reemerge into the workplace, and then now, how would you define yourself in your retirement years?
Contented, happy.
Mhm. What would you say that you do?
I knit, I crochet, I read, I quilt, I scrapbook.
And my
I
hobbies, right?
yes,
Sort of.
hobbies. Yeah. Uh-huh. And again, we get out and walk around. We walk up 2/3 of a mile to the mailbox and back is 2/3 of a mile. So we walk that just about every day unless it's bad weather. And Steve wants to walk up to get the mail and come back. I have discovered that I want to walk slower and not particularly I enjoy the view, but because my body wants to go slower than his body wants to go. So I guess that I had students who said, "Mrs. Wilson, what are you going to do when you retire?" And I said, "Whatever I want to, whenever I want to, and wherever I want to. That's what I'm going to do." And that in the 40s and 50s was not an option because I had to grade those papers, I had to plan the events, I had to be prepared for teaching. Now, thanks to your suggestion of have a journal where you write out what you want to accomplish the next day, that is something that I have discovered really is a big help to me. Otherwise, you go into the room and you pick up the coffee cup and you were going to go outside and sit on the deck, but all of a sudden you see you need to do the dishes and get them in the dishwasher and monkey mind. And your journaling suggestions keeps me focused on accomplishing what I want to do. And then I can go work the puzzle or I can quilt or do whatever.
Yeah. I like that because it's more about you recognizing or identifying not so much of what I do. I like when people ask the question, not what do you do, but what do you do for fun? So you're like, that's what I do now. What piece I wanted to touch on is you going to Paris, India, Italy, and Israel, and Costa Rica, right? So these are all places that you've either been with on me or that I sent you to. And so I'm curious how that has informed your view of the world.
I think the most important part of that was the fact that you invited your mother to go, and we would room together normally, and it was totally awesome. I To be invited by your grown child to experience something new was awesome. It was amazing, and I was so thankful for it, and I look back, and you and I have done Costa Rica as retreats with other people, and you and I have gone a couple of times by ourselves, and for mother and daughter to spend a week together without problems is amazing, and I am so thankful for that, and I know sometimes you have to leave the room before you scream at me, but it has been such a joy, and each experience has taught me a little bit more about the world and how very blessed I am in what I have in my life. Women who are trying to make a living because the husband or the man or she never had them. I've had a very blessed life, and you have expanded my horizons so much. You gave Steve and me the trip to Israel, and I am so thankful for that. We still talk about it, and it has been such a learning experience. I have realized I have gotten so much out of that because in Sunday school, I'll say, "The Elgita, I believe we went to that, and I should have brought some photographs. I'll try next week. But that's where David went when he was hiding from Saul." Yeah, this sort of thing. And if it hadn't been for what you have done for me, then it wouldn't have been there. I wouldn't have known, and I wouldn't have expanded my knowledge in that way. I went in for a brain test a week and a half ago, and when I finished, she said, you made 120." And I said, "Is that good?" And she said, "You're now the top in your age." And I thought, how much do I have that to thank for the traveling that I've done? And the I come home, I get the pictures, I put them in scrapbooks, I journal them, and then I go back and remember such wonderful times. I feel sorry for people that won't or can't make these trips because it is such a growth factor. And I think you and I started in the when I was in my 60s, didn't we? I think it was that soon.
What was the first trip we went on? Was it Costa Rica or India?
In
Was it
I
India?
India 2011.
2010.
10 was it? Yes, 10. Yes,
Was
because
that
I
your
had
first one? Oh my gosh, I took you to India first.
yeah. Aren't you surprised I continue traveling? I still that
Oh
was
my
very
gosh.
interesting, very
Yes. You got
yeah.
a sari and everything.
Yeah, and
Yes.
they're still hanging in a bag.
Yeah.
I've d d the black no, the turquoise one I wore once, I
Beautiful.
think.
Yeah.
It was gorgeous. I don't know what
Gorgeous.
yeah, I need to get those on eBay.
You were like, "I'm gonna wear them to the post office in Fletcher, Oklahoma," which has, what, 2,000 people? It's
Where
so beautiful. It's a great color. Yeah. That was
it
fun.
that was fun, and you got the pink and the black, didn't you?
Mhm. I did. Yeah.
Yep, where you get these shopping diseases. I taught you that.
Well, or you could think of them as souvenirs.
Yes.
But yeah, and they were beautiful to wear while we were there. It was really nice to feel like you were mixing in a little bit into the whole experience. But yeah, it was fun. And then it was Costa Rica
Remember the woman that stopped you on the street?
to fix my sorry.
Yes, that was that she just looked at me and walked on. I don't think she could help me, but she
She's good try, lady. But yeah, they were so nice there. So nice. So lovely. Everyone was lovely.
except the monkeys. Do you remember when we sat and drinking matcha tea or whatever, and we watched the monkeys as they bothered the people on the
Oh,
bridge?
yeah. Yeah.
It was so fun.
They stole all sorts of things. Do
Yes.
you remember, though, we went to a private kirtan lesson, and the guy I'm, like, singing, he's playing the harmonium, did he say, "Come back for another private lesson," or
He
something?
wanted no, he wanted to know how long you were gonna be there. I don't know if that was to make sure you weren't coming back or if you needed more lessons. I don't know which it was, but I remember sitting in the corner just howling.
Oh my gosh, that is so funny. Yeah, that was a funny moment.
It was. We have great memories, and I
Mhm.
remember Carol and another, girl that was there, and I went to the temple or whatever it's called, where the Beatles went.
Oh, yeah, the ashram.
Ashram, yes,
Ashram. Yeah.
ashram.
Yes.
Yeah, I keep learning ashram, and it was so fascinating to see that. There
Yeah.
was we remember the good times, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully. Hopefully, those are imprinted.
Yeah, and the bad times we remember and laugh.
It's funny, I was recently in Paris and someone said this and it really stuck with me how before you go on a trip, you're like, "Oh, I'm so excited. It's gonna be amazing, blah, blah, blah." And then you go on the trip and you're miserable the whole time. And not because you don't like what you're doing, but just because travel is hard. It's hard. No matter how you look at it, it's hard. But then when you get back, you're all nostalgic, right? You've got all your fun photos, you had a nice time, and you remember it in a way where you focus on the highlights, the glimmers. And I just love that because I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so true of how the wave of the experience really is.
Mhm. Exactly. Yeah, and if you forget some, you've got your photos or your scrapbooks to go back and go, "Oh, that was such a fun time." And thank you for all the memories because they have stuck with me, and it has been something I never expected when I started into my midlife. I was amazed when I would travel to Washington, DC to see both my children, and then to travel off on my own to Williamsburg was a new experience for me, because I hadn't done that. It just continued to expand and expand, and you definitely you got me on the plane over the ocean. So, it was a blessing, and each time, I have such great memories of all the crazy things we did, like Paris with the carousel, and, you taking photographs of me as I fell off the horse.
Gosh, that was like day one, we're jet lagged. You like couldn't get on or you couldn't get off. I can't remember. I was
I couldn't get
dying. Yes, yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that was funny. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that was fun. Paris is always fun. Before I close, is there before I ask you my last question, any final thoughts you want to share with our listeners on midlife from an 80-year-old woman's perspective? Anything you wish you'd known? I don't know. Anything else you want to share before I ask you my last question?
I one thing is each year you age, my back hurts a little bit more. My knees have been replaced, and every once in a while, they say, "We aren't as strong as we used to be." I remember I've lost a lot of people that I loved. So I guess one of the challenges is losing the loved one that are close to you. But you keep the reminders close and remember the good times. And the fact of the matter is, with toxic people, just smile at them and move on. You don't need them in your life. And Someday they may step back into your life and they aren't toxic anymore. That's the nice thing about growing old is that you do see the changes in all of you. And it hurts when you see a good friend go into dementia, which, again, this was a very good friend of you and mine, if that's correct, Donise, who went into dementia. And we used to spend every spring break with her as you were in junior high and high school. And to watch her go away, it was so heartbreaking. And thanks for the memories. You continue to increase memories and not add as much to them as you age, and you have a choice. You can either smile at the memories or cry at the memories, and either one is okay because as you age, you're your own boss. And it is a travel that I would not repeat, but it is a lifetime of good memories. And I'm thankful for that. And I'm thankful for how I get around and how I am treated. Steve and I went into Walmart last Monday or Tuesday. And as we're leaving, I hear someone say, Mrs. Wilson. And she came over and hugged me and pointed out her son to me and hugged me again. And it just touches that she would remember me and acknowledge me. And it always makes me feel good.
I
Uh,
thought you were gonna tell the story of when you went to the doctor and dad was like, "Doesn't feel like a Monday," and you're like, because it's a Tuesday." I know that's where you're going with that. Okay, my last question for you is the name of the podcast, Tranquility du Jour. So how are you finding tranquility in your everyday? I know you've mentioned lots and lots of things already. So is there anything else that really stands out that this helps you? I'll say one thing I know for you is coffee.
for sure.
And matcha, you like matcha now.
I love matcha. Yes, and when you come, we're going to have to go to the College Street Cafe, and she'll make you a matcha latte that is, oh, so good. She takes good care of me, and she'll take good care of you. And I've introduced them to the matcha latte world. Golly, I'm forgotten. Oh, things that I enjoy.
No, my question was how do you find tranquility? You're like,
Okay.
"Who am I? Why are you talking to me on the television?" Yeah. No, how do you find tranquility in your everyday?
Another thing that you taught me was breathing. And that
Mhm.
helps. If I start getting too much coffee, uh, breathing, walking, devotions, all of it. Yoga, getting up every morning and saying, "Thank you, Lord, for another day," because I'm very thankful. I'm seeing changes in so many of my friends, and it hurts to see that it's happening. And I study myself and go, is that with me? Am I going down that path as well? If so, what do I need to do to stay as healthy as possible? That's tranquility. Coterie is another thing that I thoroughly enjoy, and it gives me peace because you have me looking through the month of a certain topic. And am I addressing that topic and am I taking care of myself? Because again, the older you get, you still have this circle of friends, but you're pulling in and there may be some outside of that circle that are still friends, but they aren't in your inner circle. And tranquility is being with them sometimes. Stevie and I have our once a month gathering at at the local cafe, and we both say we need this so much. It gives us the tranquility, and when we leave, we hug each other and go back, and we feel less stress.
Good.
Whatever
Yeah,
will give less stress. That I guess that's the
good.
word.
Totally. Totally. Thank you so much, Mom. It's a treat to have you on the show, and thanks for sharing.